You'll die poor, just like your pathetic little dreams. That's what my father said to me at Christmas dinner, in front of 23 relatives, while carving the turkey like he was performing surgery on my self-worth. His new wife Vanessa laughed so hard her wine nearly came out of her nose. What none of them knew was that 72 hours earlier, I had signed the final papers acquiring Morrison Manufacturing, Dad's company, his legacy, his entire identity, for $847 million in cash. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning of that Christmas Eve, when I pulled up to my childhood home in a rental Toyota Camry, wearing jeans and a sweater I'd bought at Target specifically for this occasion. My real car, a Bentley Continental GT, was parked at my Manhattan penthouse, 63 floors above Central Park. But the family didn't know about that. They didn't know about any of it. To the Morrison family, I was still Olivia the disappointment. The daughter who abandoned a perfectly good accounting degree to chase a ridiculous dream of becoming an artist. The black sheep who'd rather paint pictures than build a real career. The embarrassment they mentioned in hushed tones at family gatherings, always followed by sympathetic head shakes and murmurs of such wasted potential. The truth was considerably different. 8 years ago, after Dad cut me off financially for refusing to work at Morrison Manufacturing, I'd moved to Brooklyn with $2,000 and a suitcase full of art supplies. I painted during the day and waitressed at night. I slept on a mattress on the floor of a studio apartment so small I could touch both walls with my arms outstretched. But I also noticed things. While serving drinks at gallery openings, I realized something the art world hadn't figured out yet. The secondary market for emerging artists was completely inefficient. Collectors were sitting on pieces worth 10 times what they'd paid, with no easy way to connect with buyers. So I built a platform. Started small, just connecting a few collectors I'd met through waitressing. Then word spread. Within 2 years, I'd facilitated over $40 million in art transactions. By year 4, we'd expanded into authentication services, art storage, and collection management. By year 6, Bellworth Art Group had offices in New York, London, Hong Kong, and Dubai. Last quarter, our valuation hit $3.2 billion. Forbes had done a profile. Bloomberg had called me the woman who disrupted the art market. I'd been invited to speak at Davos. But I'd built it all under my mother's maiden name, Bellworth. I'd kept my face out of the press, declined television interviews, and made sure my family never connected the dots. Part of it was privacy. Part of it was protection. And part of it, if I'm being completely honest, was waiting for the right moment. That moment came 3 months ago when Morrison Manufacturing started struggling. Dad had made some bad decisions, expanded too quickly, ignored the shift to automation, alienated key suppliers. The company was hemorrhaging money. He'd been secretly shopping for buyers, trying to find someone to bail him out before the whole thing collapsed. He found one. He just didn't know it was me. The acquisition had been handled through a subsidiary of Bellworth Holdings, with lawyers and intermediaries ensuring my name never appeared on any documents Dad would see. As far as he knew, he'd sold to Prescott Capital Partners, a private equity firm based in Delaware. The deal had closed on December 21st. Today was December 24th. Olivia, you actually came. My stepmother Vanessa's surprise was genuine as she opened the front door. She'd been married to Dad for 6 years now, ever since Mom passed. Vanessa was 20 years younger than him, blonde, and possessed the kind of confident condescension that came from marrying into money she hadn't earned. I almost didn't recognize you without the paint stains, she continued, eyeing my outfit. Did you drive here? In what? Rental car, I said. My regular transportation was unavailable. She nodded sympathetically. Of course. Well, come in. Your father's in a wonderful mood. Just closed a huge deal. Finally found someone to take Morrison Manufacturing off his hands before it completely tanked. He's been celebrating all week. I smiled. How wonderful for him. The house was packed with relatives. Aunts, uncles, cousins, my older brother Marcus and his perfect wife Jennifer with their perfect children. Everyone was dressed in holiday finery, holding crystal glasses of expensive wine, laughing at jokes that weren't funny because the joke teller had money. I found a quiet corner near the Christmas tree and nursed a glass of sparkling water, watching. Waiting. The prodigal daughter returns. Dad's voice boomed across the living room. He approached with arms spread wide, a performance of fatherly affection for the audience. Still doing your little paintings? Still creating, yes. That's nice, sweetheart. That's nice. He patted my shoulder like I was a child who'd shown him a mediocre finger painting. Maybe someday you'll sell one for enough to buy yourself a real car. Laughter rippled through the nearby relatives. My brother Marcus raised his glass in mock salute. How's the real world treating you, little sis? Marcus asked. He was Dad's golden child. MBA from Wharton, corner office at Morrison Manufacturing, the heir apparent. Still waiting tables? I haven't waited tables in 7 years, Marcus. Oh right, you got promoted. He grinned. What was it? Hostess? Coat check. More laughter. Jennifer covered her mouth in that way people do when they want to seem like they're not laughing at you, even though they clearly are. I sipped my water and said nothing. Dinner was served at 7. 24 of us around the massive dining table that had been in the Morrison family for 4 generations. Dad sat at the head, naturally, with Vanessa on his right and Marcus on his left. I was positioned near the end, between Cousin Derek, who sold insurance, and Aunt Patricia, who hadn't updated her opinions since 1987. Before we eat, Dad announced, standing with his wine glass raised, I want to make a toast. As most of you know, this has been a challenging year for Morrison Manufacturing. But I'm pleased to announce that I've successfully negotiated the sale of the company to Prescott Capital Partners. The deal closed this week. Applause erupted around the table. Vanessa beamed. Marcus looked slightly sick. He'd been counting on inheriting that company. What does that mean for you, Marcus? Aunt Patricia asked, concern creasing her face. The new owners have assured me that current management will be retained, Dad said quickly. Marcus's position is secure. The Morrison legacy continues, just under new ownership. I kept my expression neutral, even as I noted the small lie. I hadn't assured anyone of anything. In fact, I had very specific plans for the management structure. To success. Dad raised his glass higher. To making the smart choice when it matters. Speaking of which, his eyes found mine. Olivia, sweetheart, this is actually a perfect example of what I've been trying to tell you for years. Sometimes you have to let go of your little dreams and embrace reality. I built Morrison Manufacturing from nothing. But when the time came to be practical, to make the hard decision, I did it. That's what adults do. Richard, Vanessa murmured, a half-hearted attempt at restraint. No, she needs to hear this. Dad was on his 3rd glass of wine, his cheeks flushed, his filter dissolving. Olivia, you're 32 years old. You're not a child anymore. This fantasy about being an artist, about making a living with paintings, it's not realistic. It never was. You'll die poor, just like your pathetic little dreams. And when you do, nobody's going to be there to bail you out. The table went silent. Even by Morrison family standards, this was harsh. Vanessa's wine nearly came out her nose from laughing. Marcus had the decency to look uncomfortable, though he didn't defend me. Jennifer was staring at her plate. Aunt Patricia was nodding in agreement. I set down my fork carefully, took a breath, and was about to respond when Dad's phone rang. Ignore it, Vanessa said. It's Christmas Eve. But Dad was already looking at the screen, his brow furrowing. It's from the Prescott Capital office. Probably just a formality, but I should take it. He answered with his business voice. Richard Morrison speaking. Yes. Yes, I understand the transition team wants to. I'm sorry, what? The owner is. The color drained from his face. She's what? That's not, are you certain? The table had gone completely silent. Everyone was watching Dad, who had turned a shade of white I'd never seen before. The new owner is here, he said slowly, his voice barely above a whisper. She's my daughter. He dropped his fork. It clattered against the china plate with a sound that seemed to echo in the stunned silence. Every head turned toward me. I took a sip of my sparkling water and waited. This is a joke, Dad said, lowering the phone. This has to be some kind of joke. No joke, Dad. I kept my voice calm, measured. Prescott Capital Partners is a subsidiary of Bellworth Holdings. Bellworth Holdings is my company. I founded it 8 years ago, right after you told me I was dead to you for refusing to give up my art career. That's impossible, Marcus sputtered. Bellworth Holdings is worth, they're worth. $3.2 billion as of last quarter's valuation, I finished for him. I started with art sales, expanded into authentication and collection management, then moved into broader investments. Real estate, technology, and most recently manufacturing. You're lying. Dad's voice was shaking. You're a waitress. You paint pictures nobody buys. I haven't waited tables in 7 years. And my paintings? I stopped selling them when I realized I could make more money selling other people's art. Turns out understanding the creative market, is actually a valuable skill. Who knew? Vanessa was frantically searching on her phone. Her face went pale as she found whatever she was looking for. Richard. Richard, she's on Forbes. Olivia Bellworth, founder and CEO of Bellworth Holdings. There's a profile. There are pictures. It's her. Let me see that. Dad grabbed the phone, staring at the screen. His hands were trembling. Why? He finally asked, looking up at me. Why would you buy my company? Why keep it secret? I stood up, smoothing my Target sweater. I bought it because it was a good investment. Morrison Manufacturing has solid fundamentals and an excellent workforce, despite the mismanagement in recent years. With proper leadership and strategic modernization, it could be worth 3 times what I paid within 5 years. And the secrecy? His voice cracked. I looked around the table at the faces of people who had dismissed me, pitted me, mocked me for 8 years. I kept it secret because I wanted to know. I wanted to see, one more time, how you really felt about me when you thought I had nothing. When you thought I was still the failure you'd written off. I paused. Now I know. Olivia, sweetheart, Dad started, his tone completely different now. Don't. I held up my hand. 10 minutes ago, you told me I'd die poor like my dreams. You've been telling me some version of that for almost a decade. You cut me off, you humiliated me. You made sure everyone in this family saw me as a cautionary tale. And now that you know I'm successful, now that you know I literally own your life's work, suddenly you want to be sweet. What about me? Marcus's face had gone gray. You said current management. I said nothing of the sort. Dad assumed. I never confirmed. I looked at my brother, the golden child, the heir apparent. Here's the thing, Marcus. I've reviewed the company's performance under your leadership. It's not good. The automation delays, the supply chain mismanagement, the hostile work environment that's caused turnover to spike. That's all on you. You can't fire me. His voice was barely a whisper. I can do whatever I want. I'm the owner. I let that sink in. But I'm not going to fire you. Not tonight, anyway. I'm going to give you a choice. You can stay on with a significant reduction in role and salary and prove to me that you can actually learn and grow. Or you can leave with a reasonable severance package and figure out who you are without Daddy's company to hide behind. The room was so quiet I could hear the Christmas tree lights buzzing. My phone buzzed. I glanced at it and smiled. Ah, that's my driver. My actual car is here. I had it brought over. I started toward the door. Wait, Dad stood up, knocking his chair backward. You're leaving? Just like that. We need to talk about this. No, Dad. You need to talk about this. I've spent 8 years proving myself to people who actually matter. Investors, partners, employees, clients. I don't need to prove anything to you anymore. I don't need your approval. I don't need your support. I don't need your money. I paused at the doorway. I have plenty of my own. Through the window, I could see my Bentley pulling up the driveway, its midnight blue paint gleaming under the Christmas lights. Olivia. Vanessa's voice was different now, almost desperate. I've always said you were talented. You know I've always supported you. You called me a charity case at Easter, I said calmly. You told Aunt Patricia I was basically homeless last Thanksgiving. You specifically chose seats at family dinners to put me as far from important guests as possible. I smiled without warmth. I have an excellent memory, Vanessa. And now I own your husband's source of income. Might want to keep that in mind going forward. I walked out into the cold December air. My driver, Thomas, opened the door of the Bentley for me. Back to the city, Ms. Morrison? Yes. But take the scenic route. I want to enjoy the drive. As we pulled away, I could see the entire family spilling out onto the porch, watching the car that supposedly belonged to someone who'd never be able to afford one. Dad was saying something, his mouth moving, but I couldn't hear him through the window. I didn't need to hear it. I'd heard enough. My phone was already lighting up with messages. Dad. Marcus. Vanessa. Aunt Patricia. Cousin Derek. People who hadn't texted me in years suddenly discovering that they'd always believed in me, always knew I'd succeed, always loved me despite how it might have seemed. I turned the phone face down on the leather seat. The next morning, Christmas Day, I had breakfast at my penthouse while reviewing the restructuring plans for Morrison Manufacturing. The company would survive, would thrive eventually. The workers would keep their jobs. The Morrison name would stay on the building, at least for now. But it would be my company, my decisions, my legacy to build or sell as I chose. Dad had been right about one thing, though he'd never understand how. Sometimes you do have to let go of little dreams. Mine had grown far too big to be called little anymore. I picked up my phone, finally, and typed a single message to the family group chat. The one they'd never added me to, but that I'd known about for years. Merry Christmas, everyone. First board meeting is January 3rd. Some of you might want to update your resumes before then. Then I put the phone down, picked up my coffee, and watched the sun rise over Central Park. The view from the top was everything I'd dreamed it would be. And I'd earned every single inch of it myself.